There are mornings when you open your eyes and let out a sigh. Not because your sleep wasn't deep enough, nor because your body feels tired, but because the room around you is reflecting your own mind. A coat still draped over the chair from the night before. A few cups of tea, now cold and left uncleared. A pile of bills lying askew on the table, mixed in with unnamed scraps of paper. These things aren't big, but precisely because they are small, we easily overlook them. And then one day, they build up into a sense of heaviness that makes you not want to start anything at all. No one teaches you that clutter can quietly wear down your zest for life, just as no one tells you that tidying up isn't about strength, but about making a choice. Thomas, a man in his 70s, once lived in such a chaotic space that he himself hesitated to return home after an afternoon walk. But then everything changed, not through loud, sweeping cleaning days, but through quiet, steady, and meaningful habits. Today, we will follow that story, a journey that began with weariness, but ended in a gentle living space and a lightened mind. And quite possibly, in the small habits that Thomas practices each day, you might find a new way of living for yourself. Habit 1. Making the bed every morning. Thomas's first victory of the day. Every morning, as sunlight begins to filter through the window, Thomas doesn't rush out of the room or reach for his usual cup of coffee. The first thing he does is pull the blanket neatly into place, smooth out each fold, and adjust the pillow back to where it belongs. No need for anything elaborate or perfect. It takes less than 2 minutes. But to him, this is the opening act for a day that feels in order. Thomas once said that in the years following his retirement, each day seemed to drift by loosely. No more meetings, no more alarm clocks forcing him up, everything became spontaneous. And that spontaneity made him feel like he was floating without anchor. Until one morning, when he stumbled upon a quote that read, "Making your bed each morning is giving yourself a sense of control." Thomas decided to give it a try. Just a bed, nothing more. But strangely, it brought a sense of tidiness to his mind. Like when you tidy up a small corner of your home, you're also tidying up a bit of the mess inside yourself. He shared that ever since he started making his bed regularly, it became easier to begin other tasks. Easier to wash a cup right after using it. Easier to pick up the phone and call an old friend he'd been meaning to reach out to for 3 weeks. And most surprisingly, he began to feel that each day held a small goal to accomplish, to smile about, and to remind himself that his spirit was still alive and well. That tidy bed didn't just make the room look neat. It became a silent declaration from Thomas to himself. I am still here. I am still in charge of my life, starting from the smallest things. Habit 2. Cleaning up right after use. Thomas's golden rule. There's one thing Thomas always emphasizes whenever someone asks him the secret to keeping his home clean. Don't wait until things are messy to start cleaning. Clean as soon as it happens. It's the rule he calls touch it once. If you've picked something up, put it back in its place immediately. This habit didn't come naturally. Thomas used to leave things in limbo, a book partially read, his reading glasses, or a finished coffee cup still sitting on the table. He once said, I always thought, I'll clean it up in a bit. But that bit later often became tomorrow, then next week. Then it turned into a corner of the house I felt too lazy to walk past. Until one day, he tripped over a pair of shoes left in the hallway, the same shoes he had hastily kicked off after his evening walk. It wasn't anything serious, just a slight stumble, but it gave him a jolt. Not because of the fall, but because he realized he was living among things he had let slide. From that day, he made a rule. Never let anything sit out of place for more than 5 minutes. When he takes off his coat, he hangs it up immediately. When he finishes reading a book, he places it right back on the shelf. Kitchen tools are washed and put away before the meal even ends. These small actions, seemingly inconvenient at first, are what keep him from ever having to face a long, draining cleaning day. And perhaps more important than all is the feeling this habit gives him. Every time he returns something to where it belongs, it's like he's sending himself a message. I care about my living space, and I value every moment I am still alert enough to keep it in order. Cleaning up right after use may sound simple, but to Thomas, it is a quiet form of self-discipline and a gentle way to make each day feel a little lighter. Habit 3. Wiping surfaces daily, a mark of attentiveness. If there is one thing that makes Thomas's living space always appear pristine, it is not expensive furniture or cleverly arranged lighting. It is the spotless table surfaces, the kitchen counter free of watermarks, and the dry sink in the bathroom. Thomas doesn't pursue perfection. He pursues the comfort of living among things that are cared for with his hands and attention. His habit of wiping surfaces daily began during a visit from his young granddaughter. That day, while eating a cookie, she suddenly paused, looked closely at the table, and said, "Grandpa's table is always clean, like new." That casual comment left Thomas sitting in silence for a moment. He had never thought of wiping the table as leaving a mark, but it turned out to be a quiet way of expressing love for the space he lived in. From then on, every evening before resting, he would spend a few minutes walking around the house. A damp cloth, a bit of gentle cleaning spray, and he would softly clean the places he touched most often: the dining table, kitchen counter, chair armrests, and window sills. "It's not because it's dirty beyond tolerance," he shared, "but because I feel lighter when I see a clean surface, free of signs of neglect." More than once, while wiping the desk where he writes his journal, Thomas smiles. For him, removing dust or water stains isn't just cleaning, it's telling his home, "Thank you for sheltering me today." And when he finishes, lights a scented candle or simply sits by the window reading a few lines, he can clearly feel the difference. The air in the house seems calmer. Everything feels more orderly. And so does his mind. Wiping surfaces daily is not a chore. It is a small ritual. A ritual of attentiveness. A ritual of an experienced elderly man who understands that cleanliness does not come from grand gestures, but from subtlety in the smallest, most repeated acts, carried out with care. Habit 4. Doing a small load of laundry each day, a way to resist stagnation. Thomas used to let his dirty clothes pile up in a basket placed in the corner of his bathroom. He said that when he was younger, it was never a problem. One weekend morning was enough to wash, dry, and neatly fold everything. But then old age crept in as gently as smoke, and as unexpectedly as a gust of wind. The tasks that were once manageable in a single morning became burdens that he kept postponing, day after day. There was a time Thomas sighed as he looked at the laundry basket so full that the lid couldn't even close. He stood in front of it for a long while, hand resting on the edge, then turned away. Not because he was lazy, but because his body could no longer endure long periods of bending, standing, or carrying dripping wet clothes. He knew that if he kept waiting for a day when he felt both free and strong enough, that day might never come. From that moment, he changed his approach. Instead of saving it for the weekend, Thomas started doing a little laundry every day. Some days it was just a few pairs of socks and a towel. On others, a few thin t-shirts or a bedsheet. The lighter, the better, he reminded himself. And then something surprising happened. He started to enjoy this new rhythm. Gentle, pressure-free, with no sense of being overwhelmed. Doing a little laundry each day not only helped him avoid the feeling of being burdened, it also created a steady flow to his day. Thomas often started the washing machine in the morning, then made tea and watered the plants. The sound of running water and the drums spinning became part of the background music to his peaceful life. He once laughed and said, "Maybe old age doesn't need a day filled with accomplishments. Just a little each day enough to feel like I'm still living, still moving with the rhythm of life." Washing a small load each day not only keeps his clothes clean, but also keeps his spirit from being weighed down by postponed tasks. Thomas no longer worries about running out of clean clothes, nor does he feel burdened when stepping into the bathroom. Everything flows lightly and steadily, just like the man he has become, slow-paced but unwavering. Habit 5. Not leaving dishes overnight so tomorrow doesn't start with fatigue. Thomas always held a special respect for the morning. He believed that whether a day felt peaceful or not didn't begin when the sun rose, but from the moment you stepped out of the bedroom and felt the world around you was ready to greet you. However, there was a time when Thomas's mornings were far from peaceful. They began with a heavy feeling as he walked into the kitchen and saw the sink full of dirty plates, half-finished cups, and greasy pots from the night before. It wasn't that he didn't have time to clean. It was simply that he had thought, "I'll do it tomorrow." But he soon realized that tomorrow always started with frustration, even a little regret for having left himself with one more burden to carry. One night, after a simple dinner of toast and warm soup, he looked at the small stack of dishes in front of him and was about to walk away, saving it for the morning. But he stopped. He remembered the weariness of those old mornings and thought, "I'm too old to start my day feeling this drained." So he stood up, turned on the warm water, and in just a few quiet minutes, the dishes were spotless, the sink was gleaming, and his heart felt brighter too. From that night onward, washing the dishes after dinner became part of his daily rhythm. No rushing, no pressure for perfection, just neatness. He would wash, dry, stack them on the rack, and finally, wipe the sink clean. Each evening like that felt like gently closing the door on the day, making way for a lighter, cleaner, and easier tomorrow. He once shared, "I don't wash dishes because the dishes need to be clean. I do it because I need a morning without anything that makes me sigh." And indeed, each morning when he walked into the kitchen and saw the space tidy and clean, he felt that he hadn't just cleaned a kitchen, but had prepared a gentle mood for himself. Not leaving dishes overnight, a small act, but to Thomas, it is how he protects his sleep, preserves his peace of mind, and sends a quiet gift to tomorrow with a lighter beginning. Habit 6. Handling paperwork immediately upon receiving it, cutting off the root of clutter. Thomas's living space isn't large. Precisely because of that, every small corner needs to be cared for and maintained. And if there was ever something that made him feel as though his home was slowly shrinking day by day, it was paperwork. Utility bills, bank letters, promotional flyers, even postcards from relatives, all of them, if left unchecked, would quietly pile up into messy little stacks scattered across the dining table, on top of cabinets, and even on the sofa. Thomas once left a bundle of "to read later" letters on the coffee table for 2 whole weeks, until one day he accidentally spilled water on them and lost some important documents. No one blamed him, but he blamed himself. "It's not because I was too busy. It's because I was too lenient with disorder," he admitted. From that day on, Thomas decided that he would never again let paperwork take over his space. He placed a small wooden box near the entrance, the spot where he usually dropped off mail when he came home. Inside, he kept a paper tray with clearly divided sections. One for letters that needed immediate reading, one for unpaid bills, and another for handwritten notes and postcards he wanted to keep as memories. Everything else, advertisements, flyers, junk mail, went straight into the recycling bin the moment he picked them up. Every day when he returned home and collected the mail from the box at the gate, he spent exactly 3 minutes sorting them on the spot. 3 minutes a day in exchange for a clutter-free tabletop and the peace of mind that I won't miss anything important, Thomas said. That small habit, over time, became a gentle kind of discipline. More importantly, it helped him maintain a sense of clarity in his home. He once shared that when pieces of paper were no longer scattered everywhere, the room felt more spacious and his mind felt lighter. Because a clean home isn't just free of dust, but also free from unnecessary things. Handling paperwork as soon as it arrives is not just a habit. For Thomas, it's a way to protect clarity in life. It's a reminder to himself that tidiness doesn't begin with big actions, but with tiny decisions about which pieces of paper to keep or to let go. Habit 7. Opening the windows each morning to let in fresh air, because a house also needs to breathe. Thomas had spent many years living in a small apartment where the walls were well insulated and the windows could only open a narrow gap. In the winter, he kept everything tightly shut to stay warm. In the summer, he used fans and sometimes the air conditioner to avoid the heat. Everything seemed fine until one day, he noticed something about the air that made him feel heavy without knowing why. The house wasn't cluttered. Everything was still clean and orderly, but there was a lingering feeling of confinement. Thomas described it as a nameless weariness, as if the air in the house had been sitting still for too long and no longer had the strength to move with him. One chilly morning in early March, he decided to do something he used to think was unnecessary: open all the windows wide right after waking up. Not for long, just a few minutes. But the cool breeze rushed in, carrying the scent of fresh grass, morning dew, and distant city sounds. Thomas sat in his chair holding a warm cup of tea and clearly felt one thing. Not only was the house breathing, but he was being brought back to life too. From that day on, opening the windows became his morning ritual. Before making coffee, before folding the blanket or tidying the bed, Thomas would open every window. Some days, just a small crack to keep out the cold. On others, wide open to welcome the morning sunlight. Each time he did it, he felt like the house was being refreshed, not through cleaning, but through natural, gentle energy. He said, "We always clean visible dirt, but we forget the invisible things like stagnant air, old food smells, or hidden moisture clinging to the walls." Opening the windows for a few minutes each day was not just to freshen up a room, but to remind himself that every space needs to breathe, and every person, even in old age, deserves to live in fresh, clean air, full of life. Every time someone entered his home and exclaimed, "Why is this place always so pleasant?" Thomas simply smiled. Because he knew the secret didn't lie in scented oils or fancy decor, but in something as simple as a window opened at the right time. Habit 8. Dusting high-touch areas, conquering neglect in the smallest details. Thomas often said, "Dust is never invited, but it always shows up." And if we don't notice, it will stay forever. A line that sounds like a joke but is surprisingly true. Because dust doesn't knock, doesn't make noise. It simply settles silently on everything, from familiar tabletops to doorknobs and even the remote control he uses every night. In the past, Thomas used to dust only on weekends. He would cram all the cleaning into one Saturday morning and often ended up exhausted by the afternoon. Then one day, he happened to touch a bookshelf and left a visible fingerprint in a thin layer of dust. He stood still for a long while. Not because the dust was too thick, but because he realized the things he touched daily were sometimes the ones most often forgotten. So from that point, he changed. No more waiting for weekends. Thomas kept a microfiber cloth in a small drawer next to the sofa. Each day, he chose a few spots. One day, it might be the coffee table, another day, the bedroom doorknob, or perhaps the glass surface of the bookshelf. Just a few minutes. But by doing so, no place in his home had the chance to become a forgotten zone. He called it the habit of preserving attentiveness, because dusting isn't just about cleaning. It's a way to remind himself not to overlook the small details in life. The places we touch every day are often the clearest reflection of how we live. Absent-mindedly or mindfully, messily or carefully. What's special is that when dusting those surfaces, Thomas never rushed. He moved the cloth slowly, as if having a conversation with his home. "Thank you for being here with me today," he once said with a smile to the bookshelf. It might sound strange, but for someone living alone, keeping every little corner clean is also a way to nurture a sense of presence, connection, and aliveness. Dusting high-touch areas doesn't require much time or strength. It only needs one thing: attention. And that attention, repeated each day, is what made Thomas's home not just clean, but vibrant in the very details others so easily overlook. Habit 9. Light tidying before bed, gifting tomorrow a gentle beginning. Around 8:30 in the evening, as the sound of the TV faded and the lights dimmed to a warm yellow glow, Thomas would rise from his usual chair. Not to head straight to bed, but to begin a quiet, subtle, yet vital nightly ritual, lightly tidying up the house before night fully arrived. Someone once asked him, "Why not clean in the morning? That way you're more alert and can start the day fresh." But Thomas simply shook his head and smiled. The morning shouldn't start with the burden of unfinished business from the day before. Tidying up a bit before bed is how I give myself a pleasant beginning. He didn't do any deep cleaning. No sweeping, no mopping, just small things. Straightening a pillow that had slipped on the sofa, folding the blanket he used while reading earlier, bringing an empty teacup into the kitchen, wiping a small water stain from the table. Sometimes he would walk around the house for just a few minutes, picking up a misplaced pair of slippers, stacking a few books, unplugging unnecessary sockets. Yet these seemingly small actions were exactly what brought calm to the next morning. Thomas once shared that on the days he didn't do this, he would wake up feeling a kind of heaviness he couldn't quite explain. Only after seeing the minor clutter, an unwashed cup, a chair not pushed in, would he realize he was beginning the day with leftover tasks. And that feeling to him was what made people more likely to lose motivation and delay everything else in their day. Now, every morning, Thomas steps out of his bedroom to find everything ready to welcome him. The space is neat and clean, no sense of urgency, just quietness and order awaiting a new day. He often brews tea, opens a window, and feels it clearly. The day didn't start well by chance. It started well because the night before, he had prepared it with full presence of mind. Light tidying before bed might seem like a trivial task, something easily skipped. But for Thomas, it is a silent gift to himself, so that when he wakes, there's nothing to fix, nothing to catch up on, just the peace of living fully from the very first moment. Habit 10. Keeping cleaning tools near where they're used, turning tidying into a gentle reflex. There was a time when Thomas kept all his cleaning supplies in a large cabinet at the end of the hallway. Everything was neatly organized inside: cleaning cloths, multi-purpose sprays, small brushes, rubber gloves. But there was one very real problem. Every time he needed something, he had to go and look for it. Even a small stain on the table made him hesitate for a few minutes. "I'll clean that up later," he thought. But that later didn't always arrive. It was after he spilled some coffee on the table and forgot to wipe it right away, letting the stain harden, that Thomas decided to make a change. He realized it wasn't laziness. He had unintentionally made cleaning inconvenient. From that day, he began distributing cleaning tools throughout the house. A cleaning cloth and a small spray bottle were placed under the kitchen sink. A box of disinfecting wipes fit neatly into the living room drawer. A handheld broom leaned behind the bedroom door. In the bathroom, he kept a bottle of white vinegar and a small sponge. Everything was within arm's reach. Not to turn his home into a supply closet, but to make cleaning a natural part of everyday life. No need to prepare, search, or remind himself. If he saw dust, he wiped it. If he saw water splashed, he cleaned it. If the mirror fogged up, he sprayed and wiped it down immediately. Everything happened in mere seconds, faster than waiting for the discomfort of a messy space to grow. Thomas once said, "When cleaning is no longer a big event but just a small act, you stop avoiding it." The habit of keeping tools near their place of use didn't just help him keep his home clean. It helped him maintain a calm, uninterrupted rhythm in daily life. He turned cleaning into a reflex, quiet, unforced, as gentle as a deep breath. And for Thomas, that was enough to keep his living space fresh and his mind at ease. Habit 11. Sweeping the floor daily, keeping things clean from the very first steps. Thomas liked to walk barefoot around his house, not out of habit, but for the realness of it. His bare feet touching the cool floor each morning was his way of checking whether his home still felt right, still felt clean, still breathed like it did the day before. And it was also those bare feet that made him notice the little things others might overlook. A few breadcrumbs after dinner. A strand of hair fallen in the hallway. A few specks of dust hiding under the chair. Bit by bit, if left ignored, they could make the floor and the whole space feel heavier. Thomas didn't wait until the dirt built up enough to warrant a deep clean. He chose a different way. A few minutes of light sweeping every day. No need for a major cleanup, no bulky vacuum. Just a small broom, a lint roller, or a dry mop always kept handy in a kitchen corner. In the morning after tea, he would make a round. A quick sweep through the kitchen, a light touch along the hallway, a pass over the small rug under the sofa. Some days it took him only 3 minutes. Other days he'd sweep while watching the sunlight glitter through the window and fall softly onto the now clean floor. A clean floor makes your steps feel lighter, he smiled. Many people think that when you live alone, it's okay to be a little careless. But Thomas didn't think so. He believed that your living space is like your spirit. If you don't care for it daily, it will quietly fall into disarray. And the floor is where this shows the most. Because we walk across it every day, often without thinking. Yet every step carries energy. A clean floor, a light heart. A dusty floor, an unsettled mind. Sweeping the floor daily isn't just about cleaning a surface. It's about preserving freshness for the entire home. This was Thomas's way of respecting himself, beginning with the very first steps of the day. Habit 12. Enjoying the result. Fully living in the space you've cared for. Have you ever finished cleaning, put everything back in its place, wiped down the surfaces, fluffed the pillows, and then rushed off to the next task without a second thought? Thomas used to do that too. Once the cleaning was done, that was it. No pause, no reflection. But one day, when everything was tidy, he suddenly felt an odd emptiness. Not because the house lacked things, but because he had forgotten something important, to enjoy the result of his own effort. From then on, Thomas began adding a special moment to each day. After everything was in order, he would sit in the wooden chair by the window, pour himself a hot cup of tea, play some soft music, and do absolutely nothing. No more cleaning, no more arranging, just sitting there, letting the afternoon sunlight touch his hands, letting his eyes scan the clean, fresh room, and letting his mind settle completely. He called it a moment to fall in love with my home all over again. This habit didn't just help him relax. It helped him nurture a unique kind of gratitude. A gratitude toward himself for the strength, patience, and kindness he had poured into each little corner of his house. Sitting in a space he had lovingly tended, Thomas no longer felt lonely. On the contrary, he felt surrounded by something warm and complete. Enjoying the space you've cleaned isn't laziness, nor is it a waste of time. It's a reward, a reconnection, a chance to slow down in a world that constantly demands you to speed up. And more than anything, it's a reminder that you deserve to rest, to be at peace, to feel proud of the small, meaningful things you've done. You've just walked with me through 12 small yet powerful habits. Habits that quietly built a life of order, calm, and richness for Thomas. There's nothing grand about them, nothing that would impress anyone at first glance. But these humble acts, repeated with patience and mindfulness, helped a man living alone not only maintain his home, but preserve peace in his heart. Thomas didn't clean to impress anyone, nor did he do it out of duty. He did it because he knew he deserved to live in a neat, comforting space where every breath felt light. Perhaps you live alone. Perhaps you felt tired, overwhelmed by the daily clutter that surrounds you. But you don't need to overhaul your entire home. Just start with one small thing. Make the bed after you wake up. Wipe the table quickly after a meal. Sweep the floor for a few minutes before resting. These simple actions, if done consistently, can quietly bring you back to yourself. And as your home becomes cleaner, brighter, and more full of life, you'll understand why Thomas chose to live slowly, mindfully, and in tune with every little corner, as if each one was an extension of his soul. So what about you? Where will you begin among these 12 habits? Have you already done any? Or are you about to take your first step? Feel free to share with me in the comments. And if you think Thomas's story could help someone, a loved one, a friend, or even your future self, don't hesitate to share this video with them. A clean home might not change the world, but it just might change the way you see it, starting right where you live.